And we're live. Welcome to Useful Idiots Monday morning, where we review the worst moments of the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. I'm one of your hosts, Katie Halper.
And I'm Aaron Maté. How are you, Katie?
Good, you?
I'm well.
What's that book behind you?
The book is called The Koki Still Sing. It's by Karina Gonzalez. It comes out this month. It's a wonderful children's book about a family dealing with the tragedy of Hurricane Maria and struggling to rebuild. And I hope everybody goes and gets it, a copy if they have a kid in their life who would love a beautiful children's book. It's really wonderful.
And the Kokis are the little frogs in Puerto Rico.
That's right.
Yeah.
All
right. Cool. Well, let's see. Did everyone tweet this out?
I tweeted it out. Yes.
All right. And everyone who likes this show, you know what to do. Even if you don't like the show, I'll tell you what to do. Hit like. We got to beat the algorithm. We got to beat the Bezoses and the Zuckerbergs and the Musks of the world. And the way you do that is hitting like, recognizing that this is indeed, as JP says, killer content. So, yeah.
And that's what's cool about the like button. It brings everybody to everybody can hit the like button. It's not just for Useful Idiots fans or haters. It's for everybody.
Yeah. It's for everybody. Yeah.
It's universal.
So, it's universal. Yeah. And of course, we want to remind you that right after this, we're going to be doing a call-in where you can do call in and we take your calls and we respond to them. And the link to that is in the description to this video. And that's a free thing to do, Colin. So should we just get started?
Let's hit it.
Let's hit it with we like to start the show often with an overview of the news and from none other than Chuck Todd, Meet the Press.
Joe Manchin breathed some new life into the Democrats' reconciliation bill and into Joe Biden's presidency when he agreed to hundreds of billions to fund climate programs and bring down the cost of health care. The helpfully named Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, cobbled together with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, also calls for increased tax revenues from high earners and businesses to help trim the deficit. It's a long way from the president's far more ambitious Build Back Better plan, and Democrats still need to pass it without any Republican help. Paging Kirsten Sinema. Plus, the good news stops there because the administration has had to argue that we're not in a recession, despite a second straight quarter of negative economic growth that usually foreshadows a recession. Still, as Democrats face strong headwinds in November, this deal gives Mr. Biden a big victory to brag about, and Democrats an unexpected success they can campaign on, as disaffected Democratic voters needed a reason to turn out in November.
I think we must stay in session for as long as it takes to get this plan done.
We're in a recession, and it's not the time to increase taxes or spending. It's going to feed the fires of inflation.
All right, so an interesting thing happened. I don't know if you know about this, Aaron, but basically Mitch McConnell got Mitch McConnelled because Chuck Schumer told Mitch they really wanted the Republicans to vote for this CHIPS bill about basically, microchips. They wanted that. And Chuck Schumer said to Mitch, look, Mitch, I'm not going to do anything else in reconciliation. If you please, so can you please vote yes on this CHIPS bill? And Mitch McConnell was like, yes, okay. And then he voted yes. And then lo and behold, Chuck Schumer got Joe Manchin to vote for this thing. So it was a moment of political maneuvering, the likes of which are rarely seen from the Democrats and always seen from the Republicans.
Yes. My only issue with what Chuck is saying there is he's talking about this gives Democrats a success, momentum for the midterms. Shouldn't we wait until they pass it first? Because we've been here before, right? We've seen these successes before from the Democrats where they think they have something, but then they don't. And someone like Joe Manchin ends up ruining it. So I'm not sure if I can trust him yet. And also the fact is, look, originally there was so much more that Democrats were going to do.
Oh yeah, of course.
3.5, whatever that figure was for the Build Back Better. It was going to be huge. And now it's down to something a lot smaller. And we're supposed to take that as some sort of victory.
Right. It's quite pathetic, actually. But it's like the Dems are so bad at whipping people, their own party, that this is a huge deal.
Yeah.
It's not. It's we're damning them with faint praise. Well, we're not praising them, but whoever's praising them is damning them with faint praise. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the next clip, which is Joe Manchin, who did the whole rounds. We don't have time to show you every clip of him because he went on basically all the Sunday morning shows.
Republican colleagues think you and Chuck Schumer did something underhanded by essentially, it looked like there wasn't going to be anything.
I think we didn't play it totally from the beginning.
Your Republican colleagues think you and Chuck Schumer did something underhanded by essentially, it looked like there wasn't going to be anything big passed, and then you changed course, worked out something with Schumer. Senator Cornyn, the Republican from Texas, said that unveiling this agreement between you and Senator Schumer was a declaration of political warfare.
It's such a shame. John Cornyn's a good friend of mine. He's such a good man. And for the politics to be so toxic right now, first of all, I never thought this would come to fruition. I never spoke with anybody about it, any of my colleagues, because they were frustrated that nothing happened for so long. On the other, I never could get to Build Back Better, which was a $3.5 trillion spending bill. This is a $400 billion investment bill. And everything my Republicans talked about, reducing the amount of...
That's such a funny choice of words. So when Democrats are trying to spend, or when the government's trying to spend on things like childcare,
right?
Helping out struggling families, that is a spending bill. When Joe Manchin pares it down to like a fraction of what it was, that's an investment bill.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not spending, it's investment.
Yeah. I know. He's so full of saying nothing, except political spin. I mean, I guess that doesn't make him unique. That makes him just like any other politician. But his affect is so chill as he refuses to fund things like child tax credit, for instance.
Exactly.
Helping get rid of, helping people who are living in extreme poverty have food for their kids, basically. Yeah. But he's so avuncular in his affect. It's really funny.
We got to invest. We can't spend. We got to invest.
Right. We got to invest. Yeah.
Right. Debt that we have, we're paying down $300 billion, first time in 25 years. They've got to like that. And next of all, they wanted more energy. I want more energy. We're going to be producing more energy. There's an agreement that we're going to be drilling and doing more that we can to bring more energy to the market that reduces prices. They like that.
Let me ask
and there's going to be a streamlining of permitting, John. They got to like that. So I'm hoping they just cool off, take a good look at the bill.
Cool off. Interesting choice of words. Very interesting choice of words, given all the talk of climate change. But yeah, he's basically trying to say, like, Republicans, you should be happy. We're making it easier to drill. Why are you complaining? It's so funny to watch him try to make his case by presenting what he's voting for as evil as possible. That's how he tries to get make his case to Republicans.
We got rising emissions. They got to like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So we have a little bit more of Joe Manchin's. Let's take a look.
Hope Democrats.
By the way, Maggie Brennan is off.
Do you hope
the other guy on Face the Nation? Now here he is on Meet the Press. This is interesting.
Do you hope Democrats keep control of the House and Senate?
I think people are sick and tired of politics, Chuck. I really do. I think they're sick and tired of Democrats and Republicans fighting and feuding and holding pieces of legislation hostage because they didn't get what they wanted or something, or someone might.
Hold up. He said people are tired of politicians who hold pieces of legislation hostage because they didn't get what they want, right?
Yeah.
Did I just hear him say that?
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Right. That's you, Joe Manchin. That's you. That's what he did.
Yeah,
that's why we're even in this mess.
Yeah, that's some projection there.
Yeah.
I think that's what we would call projection. Yeah. I'm no Freudian, but yeah. Okay.
Good for him for recognizing why people don't like him.
Yeah, true. All right, let's keep going.
Get credit for something. Why don't we start doing something for our country? Why don't we just say, this is good for America? I've always said the best politics is good government. Do something good, Chuck. But I'm not going to predict what's going to happen.
I'm not asking you to
predict.
predict.
I just want to make sure we do something good. And this is...
What result do you want? Do you want the Democrats to keep control of the United States Senate and the House of Representatives?
Oh, I'd love... I'm not making those choices or decisions on that. I'm going to work with whatever I have. I've always said that. I think the Democrats have great candidates that are running. They're good people I've worked with. And I have a tremendous amount of respect and friendship with my Republican colleagues. So I can work on either side very easily.
So you don't care
I don't
the
have
outcome?
A problem.
You don't care about the outcome this year of the election?
Well, whatever the voters choose, I can't decide what's going to happen in Kansas or California or Texas. I really can't. I've always taken the approach, whoever you send me, that's your representative, and I respect them. And I respect the state for the people they send, and I give it my best to work with them to do the best for my country. I don't play the politics that way. I don't like it that way. That's not who I am.
I don't play the politics that way. When I refuse to answer a question about whether or not I'd like the Dems to keep the Senate, I'm not playing politics. And you can ask me the same question and I will refuse to answer it. He's asking him if he wants the Democrats to stay in control. And first he says, I can't predict that. And then he's like, no, I'm asking you if you want them to stay in control. And he's like, I can't control that. It's like, no, I'm asking you if you want it to happen.
He's politically agnostic.
Yeah, he is. He's bi-curious.
He's kind of like an atheist for politics, you know?
Yeah.
He doesn't believe in any party.
Yeah, he just believes in governing, which is obviously not
Exactly.
true. He just believes in donors. As someone pointed out, I highlighted in the comment before, but he was reading the teleprompter from his donors. He really is it's so funny because he's post-partisan, but like in the worst way.
Yes, he only works for fossil fuel corporations.
Right. Yeah. No parties. He's post-partisan that way. Yeah. Now, if you think that was politically weird or not weird, maybe it's totally typical of him because he's so Republican light. Here he is being asked about whether he would support fellow Joe-named politician Joe Biden.
President Biden says he plans to run for re-election in 2024. You have not yet committed to supporting him in 2024. Do you think President Biden deserves a second term?
Jake, I'm not getting involved in any election right now. 2022, 2024, I'm not speculating on it. President Biden is my president right now. I'm going to work with him and his administration to the best of my ability to help the people in my state of West Virginia and this country. And we have agreements, we have respectful agreements, but we respect each other and we work through them. So this is what people are upset about. Everything's about the next election. This is about today's inflation rates that's killing people. We have got to get the inflation rate down. We have got to have an energy policy that works for America. And we're not going to raise taxes, but people should be paying their fair share, especially the largest corporations in America that have $1 billion of value or greater. Can't they pay at least 15% so that we can move forward and be the leader of the world and the superpower that we are?
Wow. Very slick politically.
If I'm Biden, though, I'm cool with that. I don't mind if Joe Manchin's not coming out swinging for me.
Yeah. In fact, you're right. I wonder if Biden asked him to not come out swinging for him. Yeah. Maybe did him a favor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, speaking of no difference between Democrats and Republicans, let's go to this very good clip, juicy clip from Meet the Press.
Like somebody felt like.
The people who are going to speak in this clip are former Republican congressman and also a Democratic strategist. Okay.
They felt like somebody who was following the Mitt Romney playbook. I've got a 6-point plan. And somebody who's following the Donald Trump playbook. Open border socialist. Like, that's the party now, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's a reminder of the toxicity that Donald Trump inserted into the Republican Party. Some people are fighting to take that out. Obviously, Mike Pence has picked up that flag now. Will they succeed or not? We'll see. I mean, there have been some successes by more traditional or establishment-type Republicans this primary season. It doesn't appear that Donald Trump is the totally dominant, force in the party anymore. He does have some competition, but these days he's also getting support from Democrats who are funding some of these MAGA Trump candidates, which I think is, a big problem, and I think a scandal hasn't been discussed enough. But these candidates, they're getting amplified, they're getting heard, and the more that message is out there, the more it intoxicates our politics.
Adrian, are you comfortable with that strategy that the DCCC did this week? And it's not the first time sort of helping essentially somebody who's an illiberal, small d Democrat?
Yeah, look, as a tale of all this time, both Democrats and Republicans have been doing this for a long time. You want to make sure that you are running against the weakest opponent that you possibly can. I'm not seeing all the empirical data, but I do have faith that the strategists at the DCCC are seeing something that says if we can help get these, crazy insurrectionists over the finish line to being the general election nominee. Congress? Well, look, it's a risk that we have to take. But let me also say this, Chuck. Democrats are often criticized for not being tough enough or not being, aggressive enough when it comes to strategy. Here's an example of us doing that, and we're getting criticized.
But I think the challenge, though, and when I talk to Democrats who are really frustrated and worried about this strategy, they say the problem is.
So the criticism of Democrats is that they're not putting enough resources into supporting MAGA Republicans. That's what I'm getting here from this Democratic strategist. Like, our base wants us to put more resources into helping support MAGA candidates for our Pied Piper strategy, because it worked so well for us when we did that in 2016, when we encouraged Donald Trump to run and thought that would destroy the party, which of course did the exact opposite. So now this strategist is saying that the base wants more of that. I think the base wants Democrats to be tough in terms of actually doing something policy-wise.
Right.
Not putting their weight into trying to get more MAGA people elected or nominated.
Getting more MAGA people to win their primaries.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and in case people don't know this, we've been talking about it on Useful Idiots quite a bit, but the Dems are funding more extremist right-wing MAGA candidates. Excuse me. In the hopes that they will win their primaries and then be less appealing, less palatable, less electable in the generals against the Democrats. And this is Kristen Welker who's going to make the argument about why that's actually a bad idea.
Twofold. One, the person might actually get into office. And number two, it makes Democrats look hypocritical for saying these people are a threat to the nation's democracy. And Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania is the perfect example. Someone who Democrats really wanted to win the primary. Now he has in the gubernatorial race. And now he's doing better in the polls, Chuck. And that is making Pennsylvania Democrats very nervous.
So, yeah, two reasons why it's a bad look. They could win, and the Dems look like the total hypocritical ghouls that they actually are.
But that's what the base wants, Katie. The base wants
to
help elect MAGA Republicans again, like they did in 2016.
Yeah.
They're demanding it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
they're finally talking about it. I think they're talking about it because we've been talking about it.
Yeah, really? Okay. All right.
Yeah, could be. I'm just putting it out there as a possibility. All right, what do we got next? Oh, this is interesting. We got none other than Jon Stewart, who's been making the media rounds.
Burn pits. Stay with us. Welcome back. 1 month ago, 84 senators voted for a bill to aid veterans who were exposed to toxins like Agent Orange or in burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. But this past week, 25 Republicans who had voted yes on that bill switched their votes and blocked the bill from passage. Why? Republicans claim the issue is how the bill is being funded.
It's a budgetary gimmick that has the intent of making it possible to have a huge explosion in unrelated spending. This is not what this bill was about. We can fix it. We can do it immediately.
But Democrats suggest another reason, that Republicans were simply retaliating over the surprise announcement of the Manchin-Schumer deal on climate and health care. And among those most outraged by the switch was comedian and veterans advocate Jon Stewart. And Jon Stewart, who hosts The Problem with Jon Stewart on Apple TV, joins me now. Mr. Stewart, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thanks very much, Chuck. Appreciate it.
Look, let me start. You were so blindsided by this. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you were organizing essentially a thank you press conference. This is what we needed to explain why this bill was so important. And all of a sudden this happened. Walk me through that shock and tell me whether you feel any better about this bill being passed today.
Well, it was devastating. I mean, the bill passed the House in March. 256 to 174, right? Got sent to the Senate. There were some changes that needed to be made. There were some legitimate concerns about implementation, how the VA could handle the new influx of patients, the specialized care they need. So the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee went to work on the bill, and they improved it. They cut about $40 billion of spending out of it. They made it more accountable. They made it more direct. Then it went to the Senate floor, passed out of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee unanimously. Senators Tester and Moran, Democrat and a Republican, put it all together. It came out unanimously, and in June, it went to the floor of the Senate, and it passed 84-14, which in this Senate, I mean, you can't get this Senate to pass the ice cream is delicious law, 84-14. I mean, it was a landslide. There was a technical issue in it, so it had to go back to the House. One sentence. So nothing was added, no gimmick was put in, nothing was changed. When it came back to the Senate to what we thought was just a procedural vote, then they shot it down. But nothing had changed in the bill from the one that they had passed 84-14 in June. And so none of us understood it. And I asked Senator Cruz why. What had been inserted into the bill? What gimmick, what budgetary flip had they inserted in there that caused you to change your vote from yes on June 16th to no in July? And do you know what he said, Chuck?
Well, go ahead. I was going to play his clip for you, but you beat me to it, so tell me.
He didn't say anything. Right. He can't point to anything specific that was changed. They've all just got this mumbo jumbo about a budgetary gimmick, but nothing changed. Yeah. This isn't my opinion. Yeah. It's on Congress.gov. The text of the bill they voted for June 14th is the same bill.
Well, let me get you to react to him. Here.
Commenter Gavin Hillock makes a very good point. He says, well, at least they're caring for the victims of Havana syndrome, which is so true. So Congress passed a lot of money to fund victims of so-called Havana syndrome, even though, which is this conspiracy theory put out by the U.S. intelligence community and their allied media stenographers that Russia or China or some other evil bad guy country has been beaming microwave weapons at U.S. diplomats abroad in Cuba and Russia and elsewhere. And so Congress passed a measure to pay for their health care, even though the director of the CIA, William Burns, just again admitted that they have no evidence that Havana syndrome exists and no evidence that these foreign countries are beaming microwave weapons at U.S. diplomats. So Congress funded a program to help a fictional ailment put out by intelligence officials, but they won't fund healthcare for veterans wounded in the wars that these same people voted to authorize.
Right. Yeah. It's insane. Very on brand, though, in a way. Who will speak for the victims of Havana syndrome? Let's see this very, very attractive. Speaking of Havana and Cuba, let's see what Cuban American Senator Ted Cruz had to say about this bill, which was
what Ted Cruz said, directing it to you.
As the Democrats played a budgetary trick, which is they took $400 billion in discretionary spending and they shifted it to mandatory. And the reason they did that is they want to spend $400 billion more discretionary funds on completely unrelated matters. And so it's just part of the out of control spending from the left. And
before I get you to respond, I mean, the unrelated matters is just,
side note, that clip comes from TMZ. That's what the caption says.
Yeah.
So TMZ is doing political reporting now. I didn't know that.
Well, when you have someone as sexy and celebrity like as Ted Cruz, that it's post-political.
It's universal. That's right. He breaks it together.
Yeah, he has a lot of crossover effect.
This money, even when you create the bigger pool, still only can be spent on veterans. But anyway, go ahead.
That's correct.
Yes.
Well, the difference between mandatory and discretionary is that's just a word salad that he's spewing into his coffee cup on his way to God knows where. As veterans sit in Washington, D.C. in the sweltering heat, demanding that they pass this legislation that they've been fighting for 15 years. Look, anybody can say anything. We could say Elvis Presley is still alive, but at some point we all have to live in reality. And what he is saying is just factually incorrect.
Okay.
The bill that Ted Cruz voted yes on.
Yeah. So it is pretty stunning. I mean, this is, and it looks like the reason they are voting against this bill, which again was going to help veterans who were basically poisoned by things like Agent Orange or burn pits. I mean, it is a pretty insane political look to do this. And Republicans are voting against it, even though they voted for it. And it looks like they're doing it to screw the Dems. They don't want the Dems to claim a victory from this, to get a win from this. But what's so annoying is that they're all regurgitating this talking point about how it's like a gimmick, a spending gimmick. And it's just not true, because nothing changed from the time that they voted for it and now.
It's so callous and sadistic, and especially given that these same people who are denying benefits to these veterans are the same ones who put them in harm's way to begin with by voting for all of these wars, and by voting always to give even more money to the Pentagon than the Pentagon even asked for. I just want to say one thing. You know, I'm a big Jon Stewart fan. I think he's probably my favorite liberal out there, but I wish he would say something sometimes, not only about veterans, but about the civilians who U.S. forces occupy and kill and injure. And they should be compensated too. And maybe I've missed it, but I never see him talk about them. And they get forgotten in this conversation.
They do. And also people who, you know, it would be great if we fought for healthcare for people who weren't soldiers, you know, people in the military. But and I agree with what you're saying. So let's get him on board to be a little bit more demanding in a good way. Yeah. But, you know, I will say he was pretty critical of Israel. I'll give him some credit for that. Not as critical as you and I are, but when you look at when he was doing it, it was pretty early on. Yeah.
There's a lot about Jon Stewart to applaud. He's done some, you know, and I remember way before it became acceptable, he was critical of Israel, and that's great. But I'm saying on this issue, I just wish he would acknowledge more the civilians that U.S. forces killed. Right. You know, by the way, Joe Biden has said before that he, on the topic of burn pits, that he wonders sometimes if the burn pits of Iraq helped give his son Beau cancer, because, you know, Beau Biden died of cancer, and Joe Biden has raised the issue before that possibly it came from burn pits. So this is an issue that even impacts Joe Biden. Yeah. But yet Republicans are so, you know, just who they are, and so out of spite, they won't even give health care to the people they send over to die. So
I think it's going to backfire, but
you think so?
I think so, but we'll see. And let me just make a little plug. My mom, Nora Eisenberg, wrote a great book called When You Come Home that deals with 3 generations of war. And it's funny you said this, Michael Coates. Burn pits were the cause of the first Gulf War syndrome. She writes about Gulf War syndrome and burn pits. So highly recommend that book. When You Come Home. Yeah. All right. Next clip.
You've seen, Frank, a good news for Biden this past week. He got a major semiconductor bill passed. He's got a deal with Manchin.
So this is Jonathan Karl of ABC speaking to, that's Frank Luntz, right?
Right, Frank Luntz, yep.
Oh, okay.
Who's a spin doctor who worked for the Republicans and helped them come up with terms like the Clear Skies Act. Uses turns of phrase, and we're going to get into that a little bit, but that's his lane, is using language, weaponizing language for political means. Yeah.
Manchin's on board with Build Back Better, sort of. What do you think? Does Manchin just give him a lifeline?
I don't think this is significant.
You don't think it's significant?
I have a simple question.
Yeah.
Are Americans better off today than they were 2 years ago? Are you nervous about filling your tank up with gas? We know that half of Americans can't do it. 1 out of 5 have to return food when they get to the cashier because they simply can't afford it. That this is too much about Washington and not about the quality of life of the average individual. I know.
Okay, I'm sorry. So he starts out by saying, I have a question. Are Americans better off than they were 2 years ago? That's an obvious reference to Ronald Reagan's catchphrase, which people like, I don't know, maybe Frank Luntz was involved in formulating that, but certainly you can tell when he says that, that line sort of blew Frank Luntz's mind when he first heard it. Right. And he's been waiting for a long time to be able to drop it just so he could be like the Gipper.
Yeah, the Gipper. Yeah. But with Ronald Reagan had a much better head of hair.
Come on.
He had a head of hair.
Yeah.
Frank, you just need to embrace the baldness. Just embrace it. Anyway.
Well, the Gipper certainly was sunnier. I mean, Frank, when he's saying this, he looks kind of dour. He looks like he's sullen. Our Americans better out. He doesn't have the kind of like the sunny disposition that Ronald Reagan faked very well. All right.
That he likes to argue whether inflation was transitory or now he's arguing over a recession. The fact is, this sounds Orwellian. Don't argue over the words. If you can't afford not just what you want, but what you need, that is, by definition, a recession, and people are suffering right now.
So you're saying it's not a big deal in terms of the impact on the midterm?
Not only
this is a major bill.
But there's advice to the president, which is don't argue over semantics. That's my job as a language guy.
Right.
Your job.
You're the guy that does argue over words.
Yes, and it's really unseemly for the president to be fighting over the definition when people are genuinely suffering out there.
Yeah.
All right, so that's very touching, right? To hear Frank Luntz speak on behalf of the powerless and the voiceless. I just want to share some of the things that he came up with, some of the terms. So he came up with climate change instead of global warming, energy exploration instead of offshore drilling, and death tax instead of inheritance tax. And it's interesting that he said something was Orwellian in a bad way, because he on Fresh Air with Terry Gross once said, to be Orwellian is to speak with absolute clarity, to be succinct, to explain what the event is, to talk about what triggers something happening, and to do so without any pejorative whatsoever. So he was trying to rebrand Orwellian as something good. So I almost wonder if he's trying to praise Joe Biden here.
I love how he calls himself a language guy. I mean, a language guy to me would suggest you're into languages, or maybe you're into linguistics, how we acquire languages. But he's not. He's talking about the language of propaganda. So what he really means is I'm a propaganda guy, but he can't say propaganda, so he has to make that language. It's a form of propaganda.
Right. He's a spin doctor. He spins reality, but he doesn't want to say that either. Yeah. And by the way, thank you so much to Wade Worth for your generous super chat. And there was a question that, hold on, let's see. John Michael asked, can't Joe Biden, as commander-in-chief, demand the military to treat these vets that have the burn pit symptoms? I'm sure there's some executive order he could do.
Yeah, but that would suggest that Joe Biden wants to do something with his authority and
power. Yeah. In fact, he'd probably rather it not get done so he could try to blame Republicans.
Yeah, exactly. And then beg people to elect him when he needs it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hairaboutism. That's true. It is hairaboutism. That's what I engaged in when I made it about the hair.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What do we got next? Oh, this is good.
Our resident Nancy Pelosi expert as her biographer. I want to start there. You think she's going to go to Taiwan, even though Biden's made it clear that they don't want her to go?
Hey, good luck telling Nancy Pelosi where she can and cannot go. She's been protesting on the issue of Chinese record on human rights since she arrived in Congress decades ago. Remember in 1991, she unfurled a ban. She was on a congressional delegation to Beijing, went to Tiananmen Square, unfurled a pro-democracy banner, which really riled up China. So ask Bill Clinton. She didn't listen to his entreaties during his presidency about taking a softer line on China. And I do not think she'll be swayed even by another Democratic president.
Aaron, what are your thoughts on Nancy going?
Well, Nancy's such a stalwart defender of human rights. That's why she says that if Israel wasn't created, the U.S. would have had to create Israel ourselves. Right. So the U.S. could presumably occupy millions of Palestinians and deny them of their basic rights. And that's Nancy Pelosi. And now trying to stand up for human rights in Taiwan. Nothing to do, of course, with the U.S. trying to basically undermine its top competitor now, which is China, because China has, advanced so much economically. So the U.S. has to do what it always does when it wants to destabilize a rival, find an issue that can undermine it. And that right now is Taiwan. That's why Nancy is trying desperately to go to provoke China and maybe even start a war. Why not? Why not?
Well, yeah, someone put in the comments, I love how people are presenting her risking war with China as a girl boss moment. Yeah. Slay queen, literal slay queen, if she has her way, perhaps. Yeah.
Exactly.
And Taiwan is also much about it's very related to the chip, what we're talking about, the microchip. It's very related to that because Taiwan makes chips, and if China takes over the production of chips, that obviously won't be good for the U.S. competition with China. But do you notice how China's, like, the American competition with China is never about like high-speed rail? It's never about things that could actually help lots of people.
Oh, of course not. No.
The planet. Yeah.
No. In fact, we're going to show China by making sure that we have no high-speed rail.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to stoop to their level of giving people, efficient transportation, mass transit.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's the Chinese way. Yeah. That's the Chinese values, not American values.
I only wonder from China's point of view, like, if you're China, wouldn't you want maybe Nancy Pelosi to go to Taiwan? Because just let her talk.
Yeah.
She's pretty incoherent.
Right.
She doesn't really say anything. You can't understand what she's saying half the time. So if you're China, if she shows up to Taiwan, is that really such a bad thing?
Yeah, maybe they actually impersonated Taiwanese officials and invite her over.
So that's really a China plot.
It's a China plot, yeah. The saying.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, if so, this is that's a scandal. We may have covered a major Chinese interference plot.
Yeah.
On top of all the Russian interference, now China's interfering with us by trying to get Nancy Pelosi to go visit Taiwan.
Yeah, Operation Flying Pelosi.
Yeah.
Literally.
Well, the breaking news from today is, I don't know if we have the clip. I put it in there. It's cheating a little bit because the clip is from today, so maybe we don't play newer clips. But now CNN is reporting that Pelosi is going to go, and she will be showing up at some undetermined time. And the Biden administration now seems to support that. There was some talk that there were people in the White House were not down, but now it looks like they're changing their tune.
I wonder what happened. Nancy gets whatever Nancy wants, Nancy gets, as the song goes about Lola. Yeah.
Do we have the clip, Matt? It's from Morning Joe this morning.
First, want to ask. I first want to ask do you know if Speaker Pelosi has any plans to go to Taiwan, and is the administration giving her any guidance on this?
I won't speak for Speaker Pelosi's travel itinerary. I think she's better placed to do that. What I can tell you, though, Mika, is that as she prepared for this trip to the Indo-Pacific region, we absolutely met with her and her staff, gave her some context, facts, analysis, some geopolitical realities that we wanted to make sure she was aware of before she left on that trip. And, of course, we'll do that throughout the trip as she needs.
Did that geopolitical reality that they briefed her on include the possibility of her triggering World War III? Is that one of them?
It's probably one of the greatest appeals of it for her.
Mm-hmm. All right. So why is it the administration obviously very concerned that she's going to Taiwan? Do you think it's an unnecessarily provocative move?
For the speaker to go to Taiwan? No, it wouldn't be. I mean, if anything, and I heard what you were saying before here, Joe, if anything, you would think the Chinese would welcome it because it shows consistency. It shows that nothing has changed about America's one China policy adherence. It shows that nothing has changed about our obligations under the Taiwan Relations Act to help with Taiwan's self-defense. So it shows consistency. We have had congressional leaders go in the past, including a Speaker of the House. There is nothing unusual about this, and it's quite frankly disconcerting that the Chinese might use this as some sort of pretext to actually increase the tensions. And it has been the Chinese side, quite frankly, over recent weeks and months, even before there was talk about a Speaker Pelosi trip to increase the tensions across the street.
Well, first of all, Kate, he says there that I don't see why China wouldn't welcome Pelosi's visit. So wait, is he possibly tacitly endorsing our theory that China's orchestrated this whole thing?
I think he just did.
Maybe. John Kirby, welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard, yeah. Thank you for speaking truth to power.
Yeah, see, but the problem with what he's saying there about how, if anything, this shows consistency, and the U.S. has always adhered to this one China policy, which basically says that China and Taiwan are part of the same country, but just two different systems. The problem with that is that Biden just recently, when he was on a trip abroad, was asked, like, would you come to defend Taiwan if there was a military conflict with China? He said, yes, absolutely, which is not the official U.S. policy at all. So China is understandably concerned that U.S. policy is changing, especially because the U.S. is increasing its military presence in the South China Sea and around those areas, and also naming China as a #1 enemy in the recent NATO strategy, which is interesting because what does China have to do with the North Atlantic? That's anyone's guess. So I think China does have a reason to be concerned, and understandably seeing Nancy Pelosi's visit as a provocation. I think that's fair.
All right, I'm going to do something, by the way, so Aaron doesn't have to, which is implore people to like the show. Let's see how we are in terms of the likes to watchers ratio. What do we got? We got 730 likes. We got 1,752 watching. I said we get it up to, what should we get it up to before we keep going?
We need at least half. We need at least half.
Half of 1,700 is what?
That is 850.
850. All right, let's get it up. We're at 822. 822. Do I see 823? 843. Do I see 850? 846. Come on, guys. This is fun. 889, and we made it. Okay, back to work. Oh, Aaron got very upset. You guys, okay, Aaron's getting emotional because he's so moved. He's so verklempt by watching people like the show. So we had to take a moment off screen. All right. We got some more stuff. We also have another China-Russia clip if we want, or we can move on. It's up to you guys. Should we do this other China-Russia clip from ABC? Sure. All right. Since we're on the foreign policy. And also this brings us Mr. Moose. Here, I'm going to put in the private chat. Mr. Moose.
Mr. Moose. Mr. TMM, too much moose.
TMM, it's true. It's right. Yeah. Wilson, I put it in the chat. I can also put it in I can also text it to you. And I can also play it if you want, although I'll probably have an echo. All right, here we go. And this is more from this week because George Stephanopoulos isn't on.
Begin this with major stories about America's two most powerful rivals, China and Russia. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is en route to Asia, rattling China over a possible trip to Taiwan, which would be the first by a Speaker of the House in a quarter century. Meanwhile, a highly unusual negotiation is playing out in public over two Americans detained by Moscow. Senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell has been tracking the latest and joins us now from Ukraine. Ian, the Chinese are warning of major consequences if Pelosi actually goes to Taiwan, and Biden seems to agree.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's not just China who thinks this is inflammatory if it goes ahead. And I think we have to say her team have released her itinerary, which doesn't mention visiting Taiwan, although that still doesn't mean that she couldn't go because, of course, given the sensitivities, it likely wouldn't be pre-announced. Biden's saying even the U.S. military thinks it is, quote, not a good idea, and privately she's been urged against it. You know, this would be the highest level visit to the island since Gingrich went in '97. But today, China is a much more powerful country than 25 years ago. Its posture towards Taiwan is more strident, and Xi Jinping is far more prone to take risks than his predecessors. I think Beijing thinks a visit would embolden those pro-independence forces in Taiwan. They're calling this foreign interference, a violation of the One China principle. We've heard those things before, but he's also warning, as you say, of forceful measures, including military action, if she does go. Chinese media are even saying that Xi threatening America in that phone conversation with President Biden this week, saying, quote, playing with fire, you'll only burn yourself. There's a lot of rhetoric, and if she goes, China will likely respond with some show of force, but of course avoiding a direct conflict with America, but it would be highly dangerous. And here's the rub, finally. There are also many who now, if she doesn't go, it's going to be seen as capitulation to Chinese pressure. John?
Let's turn
to... So pause for a second. So now we know she is going. We now know she is going. But just want to point out, he is wearing too much mousse, TMM, or TMP, too much pomade. I think it's pomade. And someone pointed out in the comments, the emperor wears no tie, which is true. He's wearing a kind of plunging neckline and revolutionizing, I think, dress for men on TV. So
I love how he says that if Nancy Pelosi does not go to Taiwan, then that would be a capitulation
to China. Yeah, to big China.
Yeah,
the big China lobby.
Yeah. How dare China tell us that one of our top leaders, who's always supported regime change around the world, cannot go visit an area that has an element that's trying to break away from China, and that the U.S. has always supported, and it's coming at a time of record tensions between the U.S. and China. How dare China say that Nancy Pelosi shouldn't go? And for her not to go would be a capitulation.
Yeah. Should we keep playing?
Sure.
All right. But I co-sign what you said.
This has led to the first high-level talks between Russia and the United States since the invasion of Ukraine. What's your sense, Ian? Are the Russians negotiating in good faith here?
You have to rewind a little bit to see what he's more.
So many who believe now if she doesn't go, it's going to be seen as capitulation to Chinese pressure. John?
Let's turn to this talk of a possible prisoner swap to free Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan. This has led to the first high-level talks between Russia and the United States since the invasion of Ukraine. What's your sense, Ian? Are the Russians negotiating in good faith here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think the Biden administration is clearly feeling and succumbing to that public pressure to get Griner and Paul Whelan out. But of course, it's frustrated by Russia's stalling tactics. And I think that appears to explain the leak about convicted arms smuggler Victor Bout as a potential swap. It's a deal the Russians appear for now not to be taking. And this leak, I think, seems to be aimed more at easing U.S. public opinion than actually pressuring Moscow. The White House is also appearing on the back foot now, having to shoot down this idea, again floated by Russian officials, to release his character, Vadim Krasikov. He's a convicted assassin currently in jail in Germany. It's not a realistic proposal. You ask, is Russia negotiating in good faith? I don't think so. And it certainly doesn't appear to be in any rush, I think, to release either Griner or Whelan. John?
It's so funny. It's always the Russians not acting in good faith. It's never a question of whether the U.S. is acting in good faith.
Those dastardly Russians.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I really hope that Brittany Griner is freed. It's horrible what's happening to her. A small amount of hemp oil, whatever it was she was carrying. It's ridiculous the way Russia is treating her. I wish these same people had been so as passionate about freeing Maria Butina. Remember her a few years ago? She was that Russian woman who was basically arrested here because she was a Russian during the time of Russiagate, and the national security state really needed some Russians to put up as pawns. And so she was arrested, tortured, accused of being like a honeypot, using sex to gain access to U.S. officials and prominent Republicans. All that was fake, and everybody who's now calling on Russia to release Brittany Griner, all those same people, the same pundits, were cheering on the torture of Maria Butina. So it shouldn't happen to anybody, and I hope that Brittany Griner is free.
People are asking tortured.
Yeah, she was put in solitary confinement. She was subjected to. Yeah, I think you can say what happened to her was torture.
Yeah,
she was put in really, really harsh conditions for nothing. Her case was completely fake. And basically, it was during Russiagate, and they needed a Russian, and she happened to fit the bill.
Right. Yeah. Also, it would be nice if people upset about the arrest of Brittany Griner were also upset about the way that the U.S. incarcerates people over very small amounts of
absolutely
stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yes, and it's true. A lot of people do define solitary confinement as torture. Psychiatrists define it that way. Human rights lawyers define it that way. So there's a lot of consensus around that. All right. What's next? Oh, people are going to love this.
economist, a laureate and economist, a distinguished professor at the City University.
Yeah, he introduces him. We don't have to say who it is. Okay.
Laureate and economist, a distinguished professor at the City University of New York's Graduate Center, and a longtime columnist for the New York Times. Welcome to the program. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Can we dispense with the recession debate real quick? Are we in a recession, and does the term matter?
No, we aren't, and no, it doesn't. I mean,
one sentence. That was it, huh?
Yeah, that was it. It's none of the usual criteria that real experts use says that we're in a recession right now. And what does matter? The state of the economy is what it is. Jobs are abundant, although maybe the job market is weakening. Inflation is high, though maybe inflation is coming down. What does it matter whether you use the R word or not?
Certainly the White House was trying to encourage reporters.
This is Paul Krugman of the New York Times speaking to Brian Stelter. And look, he's an economist, and now he's saying that the word recession doesn't matter. So who cares, basically?
You know who would really appreciate this?
Frank Luntz.
Exactly.
Yeah. The language guy.
The language guy. He wants other people besides Biden to be talking about language. Or maybe he wouldn't appreciate this. It's a good question. Not sure what he would advise Paul.
But, this really is the theme of today's show, this sort of agnosticism on the part of all these prominent people. So Joe Manchin, he's agnostic about who wins Congress and who wins the White House.
Right.
And Paul Krugman is agnostic on whether or not it's a recession, it doesn't matter. Meh. The economy is contracting, wages are stagnant.
Meh. Labels are for jars.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day.
And Brian Stelter, of course, is lapping all this up because he also does not want to say that we're in a recession because that is not good for his preferred political party. So this is an exciting moment for Brian.
Yeah, very exciting. Yeah, good time
to use the technical definition, but certainly many are using a broader definition. So this is going to go on for a while, and I feel like everybody's playing their roles the way you would expect them to play their roles. What should the media's? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that this is especially vitriolic. I mean, I get, I've been in this business for a couple of decades and get lots of hate mail and see stuff. I've never seen anything as bad as this. Can
I just say one thing about the Chiron one-on-one with Paul Krugman?
It rhymes.
Say it again.
It could rhyme. One-on-one.
Yeah, it could. It rhymes. But also, it's like, do we really need the one-on-one? It's just a guy in front of a Skype on his computer, on his laptop, talking to Brian Stelter. Is this real? It's not a one-on-one match. They're not sparring.
Right.
It's two kind of schlubby guys just talking. The one-on-one thing, it just doesn't really fit the bill.
Right. What could they have said instead? Face to face, but they're not really face to face.
Just Zoom call with Paul Krugman.
Yeah.
With two schlubby guys.
Yeah. Two schlubs, one call. Yeah.
Determination of a lot of people to say it's a recession is above and beyond anything I've ever seen.
What do you think is driving that? Just partisanship and polarization getting worse and worse every year, and thus this?
Yeah, it's partisanship. People want it. It's the Biden recession. They want their Biden recession. They're going to have it. Never mind the fact that that it in fact is not a recession in any technical sense.
Is it fair to say this is the weirdest economy we've ever lived through?
The weirdest economy we've ever lived through. Okay.
So weird. Yeah. Is it fair to say, as an economist, you call this the freakiest economy you've ever lived through?
Are you not kind of like tripped out by this whole economy right now? Does it not blow your mind? Isn't it weird?
How weird is it?
Yeah.
Spooky.
Isn't it crazy we're talking right now on CNN? Like, I'm the host and you're the guest. Isn't that weird?
This one-on-one?
Yeah. Well,
it is.
Is that it? Is that all we got?
I think it is, except that we haven't a bonus Jon Stewart thing that you put in.
Okay.
This is just for the beginning of it. It's about Jon Stewart being the next Zelensky, who some say is a very good president.
I mean, there we go. We just had Matt do it. We don't even need that. Matt, you should just pull the clips. All right.
I've heard you say that you have thought in the past, you had given consideration of running for office. I think I have that correct. And look, we've had some precedent now. There's a guy in Ukraine who's a comedian who had a very popular show, who's now a president of Ukraine. Some people think he's a very good president. Is there any chance you run for office? I mean,
yeah. Zelensky, the guy who just posed for Vogue in a really, I think, inappropriate or just weird, to use my term, photo shoot with his wife. Something that Jon Stewart should aspire to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone loves Zelensky. Yeah, I mean, they're both short kings and Jewish.
Well, hey, then I support it. Then we need more fellow short kings. So let's do it. I'm on board.
You could run instead.
Yeah.
What if you would run instead? Zelensky never would have been in power.
And the thing about Zelensky, the reason he's called a great president by U.S. pundits is because he's following U.S. orders to basically turn his country into a U.S. proxy. That's why he's deemed a great president here. That's why there's this cult of personality around him in Vogue photo shoots, is because when people subordinate themselves to U.S. power, all of a sudden they're heroes, they're freedom fighters. So that's why we're still getting this long campaign to get Zelensky to, Zelensky is the model that we all have to follow until he becomes expendable. And I'm pretty confident that Zelensky will be kicked to the curb when he's no longer useful for the U.S.
Yeah. Well, that was your Monday morning. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed Mourning with us. We're just trying to provide.
And if you haven't had enough, you're in luck, because we're about to go live on Call-In, where you can join our call and talk to us.
Yeah, where we take your calls.
Yeah.
And also, if you ever want to see this, hear this on audio instead of video, you can do that. We make this podcast for Substack members. And you can do that at usefulidiots.substack.com. Also, we have a great extended interview. Highly recommend our Claire Daly, Mick Wallace interview from last week. Oh, they want to know how Jon Stewart answered. We can play it, but basically he just transitions to, he doesn't say he'll run. He says he'll be on the steps of the Capitol with fellow with veterans protesting.
That's right.
Yeah.
I
mean, we can play it. We have a couple minutes.
Any office at all?
There's a chance that when I go down, I'm going to come back down there to Washington.
Yeah.
And I'm going to join my brothers and sisters on the Capitol steps who have been sleeping out on fire watch. Rosie Torres of Burn Pits 360, Tim Jensen of Grunt Style, and anyone else who wants to go down there and join them on the Capitol steps. And I will join them, and we will stay there until the United States government does the right thing by the men and women who fought to protect it. That's what I'm after.
Look, I get he has to say that, because it's good. It's good language. It's good, but they didn't fight to protect anything. I mean, if they were wounded in Iraq burn pits, they were only protecting the neocon agenda of Dick Cheney. It's not their fault. I mean, they sent up for the army, and that's where the army told them to go. But I wish Jon Stewart wouldn't play into that rhetoric, because they weren't defending the country. They were occupying a foreign country and helping to destroy it.
Yeah. They were played and doing bad things. My heart goes out to both them and the people they killed.
Amen.
Yeah.
All right. usefulidiots.substack.com.
All right. Yeah.
So much bonus content there.
So much. Yeah.
And we'll see everybody who can on Call-In.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.